The great hall stretched out like a metal canyon with walls that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Captain Jake Morrison stood alone at the center of it all, his boots clicking against the cold floor as he walked to the speaking platform. Around him sat creatures from 100 different worlds, each one looking down at him like he was some kind of bug they wanted to step on. The Corthany ambassador rose from his seat high above. His body looked like a giant insect crossed with a machine, all sharp edges and clicking sounds. When he spoke, his words came out through a translator that made his voice sound like grinding metal. "Human," the ambassador said, pointing one of his forearms at Jake, "your species has broken our laws. You have spread to too many worlds. You have taken what does not belong to you." Jake kept his face calm even though his heart was beating fast. Behind him, Admiral Lisa Carter sat with the rest of the human delegation. She was trying to look brave, but Jake could see her hands shaking just a little bit. They all knew what was coming next. "The Galactic Council has made its decision," the ambassador continued. "Humanity will leave the Sol system within 30 days. All human colonies will be destroyed. Your ships will be taken apart. Your people will be scattered across the galaxy as workers and servants." A low murmur went through the hall. Some of the alien delegates seemed pleased. Others looked like they felt sorry for the humans, but not sorry enough to help them. Jake had expected this. Earth spies had told them months ago that the Council was planning something like this. The ambassador's compound eyes gleamed as he spoke again. 400 of our finest warships wait at the edge of your system. If you do not agree to our terms, they will turn your worlds into dust and ash. We have done this to 47 species before you. None have ever refused our generous offer of slavery over death. Jake stepped forward to the speaking device. His voice echoed through the great hall, clear and strong. "Ambassador, you seem to think we're like all those other species you've conquered. Are you not?" The ambassador asked with what might have been amusement. "No," Jake said simply. "We're not." The hall grew quiet. Even the constant humming of the station's machines seemed to fade away. Jake could feel thousands of eyes watching him, waiting to see what the small human would say next. "You see, Ambassador, we've been expecting this day for 50 years. Ever since we first met your kind and learned how you do business across the galaxy, we've been preparing." The ambassador made a clicking sound that the translator turned into laughter. "Preparing? You have perhaps 200 warships? We have 400, each one the size of your largest cities. Your weapons cannot pierce our shields. Your soldiers cannot match our strength." Jake smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "You're right about our ships and our weapons. But you made one mistake in all your planning." "What mistake could we possibly have made? You think we're going to fight you the way everyone else has. Ship to ship, fleet to fleet, like some kind of gentleman's war in space." Admiral Carter stood up from her seat. She walked over to stand next to Jake, her fear gone now and replaced by something much more dangerous. "We studied every species you've conquered," she said. "We learned how they fought and how they lost. Then we decided to fight differently." Dr. Kevin Hayes, who had been sitting quietly in the observation area, touched the data pad hidden in his jacket. Inside that small device were the plans and locations for Project Lazarus, humanity's darkest secret. Soon, very soon, those plans would become reality. The ambassador leaned forward, his mechanical parts whirring softly. "You speak in riddles, humans. What could you possibly do that 47 other species could not?" Jake looked up at the ambassador, then let his gaze sweep across all the other aliens in the hall. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but somehow it seemed to fill every corner of the massive space. "Every species you've conquered fought for their territory, their resources, their way of life. They fought to defend what they had built." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "But we're not fighting to defend anything, Ambassador. We gave up on defense the moment we realized what you really are." "Then what are you fighting for?" the ambassador demanded. Jake's smile grew wider and much, much colder. "We're fighting for annihilation. Complete and total annihilation. Not of us, Ambassador. Of you." The hall erupted in noise as delegates from across the galaxy began talking at once. Some were laughing, others were making sounds of anger or confusion. The ambassador raised all four of his arms for silence. "You threaten us?" he asked, his translator making his voice sound dangerous. "No," Jake said calmly. "We promise you something much worse than threats. You wanted a battle, Ambassador. You'll get annihilation instead." Admiral Carter activated her communicator. "All ships, this is Carter. Execute Protocol 7. Operation Lazarus is now active." The ambassador's eyes went wide as he realized what he was hearing. Across human space, ancient systems were coming online and sleeping weapons were beginning to wake up. The mountain had been hollowed out 50 years ago, back when humanity first learned they were not alone in the galaxy. Deep inside the Rocky Mountains, behind doors that could stop nuclear bombs, General Amy Rodriguez walked down a corridor that few people knew existed. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as emergency lights flickered on one by one. The air smelled old and metallic, like a machine that had been sleeping for too long. Behind her, Dr. Nathan Price tried to keep up, his breathing heavy from fear and excitement. "Are we really doing this?" Nathan asked for the 10th time in the last hour. Amy stopped walking and turned to face him. "The Corthany have 400 ships pointed at Earth. Our regular military has maybe 50 ships that could put up any kind of fight. You tell me if we have a choice." Nathan nodded, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He had helped create what lay behind the massive vault door at the end of the corridor. But even he was not sure what would happen when they woke it up. The door was 20 feet tall and made of metal that did not exist anywhere else on Earth. Strange symbols glowed along its edges, symbols that looked almost alive in the dim light. Amy placed her hand on a scanner that read not just her fingerprints but her DNA, her heartbeat, and something deeper that the scientists called her soul. "Pattern. General Rodriguez," the computer's voice said. "Please state the activation code." Amy took a deep breath. "Lazarus Protocol 77 Alpha, full awakening authorization, God help us all." The door began to move, splitting down the middle with a sound like the earth itself was cracking open. Cold air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of electricity. And something else, something that made both Amy and Nathan step. Backward. Beyond the door lay a cavern that stretched out further than their lights could reach. Row after row of crystal containers lined the walls, each one glowing with a soft blue light. Inside each container floated a human form. But these were not ordinary people. The first container began to open with a hiss of escaping gas. The figure. Inside was a man, tall and muscular, but his skin had a strange metallic sheen to it. His eyes opened and they glowed with the same blue light as the containers. When he sat up, Amy could see that his movements were too smooth, too perfect for a normal human being. "Colonel Ben Taylor reporting for duty," the man said, his voice carrying an odd harmonic that seemed to resonate in Amy's bones, then climbed out of his container, and Amy watched in amazement as his body adapted to the air and temperature of the cavern in seconds. His enhanced muscles rippled under skin that was half flesh and half something much more durable. Neural implants along his spine glowed softly as combat programs loaded into his consciousness. "Status report, General," Ben said, and now his voice sounded more normal, more human. "The Corthany have given us 30 days to surrender," Amy told him. "We're activating all Lazarus units immediately." Ben nodded and walked to a control panel on the wall. His fingers moved over the controls faster than Amy could follow, sending wake-up signals to thousands of containers throughout the mountain. One by one, the other revenants began to stir. They had volunteered for this transformation, every one of them. Soldiers and scientists and ordinary people who loved humanity enough to give up their humanity to save it. The process had taken them apart and put them back together, with improvements that pushed the very limits of what a human could be. Dr. Nathan Price watched in fascination and horror as container after container opened. Men and women emerged who could survive in space without suits, who could see in complete darkness, who could process information faster than the most advanced computers. They were still human in their hearts and minds, but their bodies had become something new. "How many are there?" Amy asked. 10,000 in this facility," Ben answered. 50 more facilities like this one around the world. 500,000 revenants in total, all waiting for this day. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, Captain Lavera Wells received her orders aboard the stealth ship Phantom. Her mission was different from the others. While the revenants prepared for ground combat, she would slip past the Corthany fleet and gather intelligence from their command ship. Lavera had undergone a lighter version of the revenant process, just enough enhancement to survive in space and handle technology that would kill a normal human. Her ship was invisible to most sensors, built using technology that humanity had reverse-engineered from crashed alien vessels over the past 50 years. Phantom to Earth control, she whispered into her communicator. Beginning approach to enemy fleet. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. The Phantom slipped through space like a ghost, its hull absorbing light and radio waves instead of reflecting them. Laura's enhanced eyes could see the Corthany ships in the distance, massive dark shapes, blotting out the stars. They looked confident, spread out in formation like they owned the entire solar system. They had no idea what was coming for them. Back in the mountain, Amy Rodriguez watched as the last of the revenants awakened. They stood in perfect formation, 500 of humanity's deadliest weapons wearing the faces of ordinary men and women. Their eyes all glowed with that same blue light, and when they spoke it was with one voice. "We are ready, General. Give us our targets and we will bring annihilation to humanity's enemies." Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She had helped create these beings, but sometimes she wondered if they were still human enough to care about the things they were fighting to protect. Ben Taylor seemed to sense her thoughts. He walked over to her, and when he smiled, for just a moment he looked like the young soldier he had been before the transformation. "Don't worry, General," he said softly. "We remember what we're fighting for. We remember who we used to be. But what makes us dangerous?" Amy nodded and activated the facility's main communication system. "All Lazarus stations, this is Rodriguez. Begin deployment immediately. Show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the human race." Above them, the first Corthany scouts were entering Earth's atmosphere, confident that they would find a species ready to surrender. Instead, they were about to discover that humanity had been preparing for this war since the day they first learned they were not alone in the universe. Commander Rick Davis watched the Corthany fleet approach Luna Station through his ship's main screen. 200 massive alien warships moved through space like hungry predators, their dark hulls reflecting the light of distant stars, his own. Small fleet of 12 human destroyers looked pathetic in comparison, like toys floating in an ocean. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "the enemy admiral is transmitting." The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Victor, the merciless. The Corthany's insect-like features were twisted into what might have been a smile, and his forearms gestured dismissively at Rick's tiny fleet. "Human Commander," Victor's translated voice buzzed through the speakers, "I am here to demonstrate why resistance is pointless. Your 12 ships against my 200. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick." Rick leaned back in his command chair and smiled. "Admiral, I appreciate the offer, but I think we'll pass. You see, we have something you don't." "And what is that?" "Patience." The alien admiral made a sound that the translator turned into laughter. "Patience will not stop my weapons from tearing your ships apart, human. You have 60 seconds to surrender, or I will demonstrate why 47 species chose slavery over extinction." Rick nodded to his weapons officer. "Begin the performance." What happened next looked exactly like what the Corthany expected. The human ships opened fire with their primitive weapons, their missiles and energy beams splashing harmlessly against the alien shields. The Corthany returned fire with devastating effect, their advanced plasma cannons cutting through human armor like paper. One by one, Rick's ships began to explode in brilliant flashes of light. Emergency transmissions filled the communication channels as human crews screamed for help, begged for mercy, or simply cried out in pain as their ships died around them. It was exactly the kind of desperate, doomed last stand that the galaxy had seen so many times before. Admiral Victor watched with satisfaction as the 11th human ship broke apart under his guns. Only Rick's flagship remained, drifting dead in space with its engines cold and its weapons silent. The alien admiral opened a communication channel to gloat over his victory. "Human Commander, are you still alive in that wreck? I want you to watch as I turn Luna Station into dust. I want you to see what happens to the species that defy the Korthani Empire." Rick's voice came back weak and full of static, as if his communication system was barely working. "Please, we surrender. Don't destroy the station. There are civilians there. Too late for mercy, human. You should have thought of that before you chose to fight." The Korthani fleet moved into position around Luna Station, a civilian mining facility that seemed to have no defenses at all. The miners had already evacuated according to the emergency broadcasts, leaving behind only empty buildings and abandoned equipment. Admiral Vector gave the order to open fire. That was when everything went wrong for the Korthani, hidden among the asteroid debris that Luna Station had been mining for decades. 1,000 automated defense platforms suddenly came online. Each platform was no bigger than a fighter ship, invisible to sensors until they activated their weapon systems. But these were not ordinary weapons. The platforms opened fire with quantum disruptors, a technology that humanity had developed in secret over the past 30 years. The exotic energy beams passed right through Korthani shields as if they were not there, tearing into the alien ships' hulls and causing them to simply cease to exist in brilliant flashes of twisted space-time. Admiral Vector watched in horror as half his fleet vanished in the space of 10 seconds. His mighty dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer long and armed with enough firepower to level a planet, were being destroyed by weapons fired from tiny platforms that his sensors had never even detected. "All ships, emergency jump!" he screamed into his communicator. "Get us out of here." But the platforms had more than just weapons. Gravity generators activated throughout the asteroid field, creating artificial gravity wells that prevented faster-than-light travel. The surviving Korthani ships were trapped, unable to escape or fight back effectively against enemies. They could barely see. Then came the second shock. The human ships that had been destroyed suddenly reactivated. Their hulls, which had appeared to be torn apart by Korthani weapons, began to regenerate using experimental nanotechnology. What had looked like fatal damage was revealed to be nothing more than camouflage. Carefully designed to fool alien sensors, Rick Davis appeared on the main communication channel, his earlier weakness replaced by calm confidence. "Admiral Vector, I hope you enjoyed the show. We've been practicing that routine for 20 years. "Impossible," the alien admiral snarled. "I saw your ships die. I watched them burn. You saw what we wanted you to see. Every human in this system volunteered for the Revenant program. We let you kill us because dead enemies don't look like threats." From the destroyed ships, figures, and spacesuits began emerging. But these were not ordinary humans trying to escape from wrecked vessels. These were revenants, and they had allowed their ships to be destroyed as part of the plan. The enhanced humans moved through space without need for propulsion systems, their augmented bodies capable of surviving in vacuum indefinitely. They carried weapons that no normal human could lift, weapons designed specifically to penetrate Korthani armor. Admiral Vector watched in growing terror as the revenants swarmed over his remaining ships. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, cutting through his hulls and slaughtering his crews with ruthless efficiency. His soldiers, bred for conquest and trained from birth to fight, fled in panic from enemies that seemed more like demons than men. "This is impossible," Vector whispered to himself. "Humans are weak. Humans are primitive. How can they do this?" His communication officer, one of the few crew members still alive on the bridge, looked at him with compound eyes wide with fear. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth." The main screen showed President Helen Foster sitting calmly in the Oval Office. Behind her, through the windows, the lights of Washington, D.C. sparkled in the night. "Admiral Vector," she said in a voice that was perfectly polite and utterly cold, "I hope you're learning an important lesson today. For 50 years, we've watched your empire spread across the galaxy through intimidation and overwhelming force. We've seen you break species that could have been our friends and allies. Victor could only stare as his ship shook under the impact of human weapons. Today, we're sending a message to your empire and to the rest of the galaxy, the president continued. Humanity will not go quietly. We are not the prey you believed us to be. We are the predators you never saw coming. The last thing, Admiral, Victor saw was a revenant soldier cutting through his bridge door with bare hands that glowed with contained plasma energy. Admiral Zekton of the Corthony Third Fleet had never known fear until he saw Jupiter growing larger on his main screen. His force of 80 heavy cruisers was supposed to glass Mars and send a message to the humans about the price of resistance. Instead, he was about to learn that the gas giant held secrets that would turn his understanding of warfare upside down. Sir, his sensor officer reported, we're detecting massive energy readings from the Jupiter system. Something is very wrong here. Zekton studied the tactical display with growing unease. Intelligence reports had told him that Jupiter was nothing more than a gas ball with a few small moons used for mining operations. There should have been no significant human presence there, certainly nothing that could threaten his massive warships. Continue the approach, he ordered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. A few mining stations cannot stand against the Third Fleet. Captain Emma Clark sat in the command center buried deep inside Ganymede, Jupiter's largest moon. Around her, dozens of technicians worked at control stations that connected to every automated system in the outer solar system. The ice and rock above her head hid the largest weapons platform that humanity had ever built. Emma's enhanced eyes tracked thousands of data, streamed simultaneously as her revenant modified brain processed information faster than any normal human could manage. She had volunteered for the enhancement program specifically for this moment, when someone would need to coordinate a battle involving 50,000 individual weapon systems. Enemy fleet entering optimal range, her tactical officer reported. Begin Phase 1, Emma said calmly. Release the swarm. From hidden bays scattered across Jupiter's moons, clouds of small objects began to emerge. Each one was no larger than a fighter craft, but they moved with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. The Corthony sensors registered them as debris. At first, just chunks of ice and metal drifting in space. Admiral Zekton frowned as his ships moved deeper into the Jupiter system. What are those objects? His sensor officer worked frantically at his console. Unknown, sir. They appear to be some kind of automated probes, but they're not matching any known human technology. Destroy them. We don't have time for mysteries. The Corthony opened fire with their secondary weapons, expecting to clear away the strange objects with ease. Their energy beams struck the targets and passed right through them as if they were not there at all. Sir, the sensor officer's voice was tight with panic. The objects are phase-shifting. They're moving in and out of normal space-time. Emma Clark watched the tactical display with satisfaction as her hunter-killer drones began their attack. Each drone was equipped with technology that humanity had developed from studying captured alien equipment over decades of secret research. They could exist partially outside normal reality, making them nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. Phase 2, Emma ordered, target their shield generators. The drones swarmed over the Corthony ships like angry insects. Their weapons were small compared to the massive alien vessels, but they struck with surgical precision at critical systems. Shield generators exploded in chains of secondary damage as the tiny human weapons found weak points that larger guns would have missed. Admiral Zekton watched his mighty fleet being torn apart by enemies he could barely see. His ship's shields, designed to deflect the most powerful conventional weapons in the galaxy, were useless against attacks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. All ships, emergency formation, he commanded. Concentrate our defensive fire. But the human drones were already adapting to his tactics. They had been programmed with combat algorithms taken from the minds of humanity's best military strategists, and they learned from each exchange of fire. What worked against them once would not work again. Dr. Janet Murphy monitored the battle from Europa Research Station, recording every moment for analysis. She had spent years studying Korthani psychology and culture, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited in exactly this kind of situation. "Emma," she transmitted to the command center on Ganymede, "it's time for the psychological warfare package." Emma nodded and activated a special set of systems that had been built specifically to terrify the Korthani. Throughout their empires' history, the alien species had one consistent fear that appeared in all their mythology and cultural records. They called it the Screaming Dark, a place where warriors' souls were consumed by shadow creatures that fed on fear itself. Human stealth ships, painted with light-absorbing materials that made them invisible against the blackness of space, began to emerge from hiding places throughout the Jupiter system. They moved without sound, without light, like holes in reality itself, but they carried weapons that made sounds the Korthani recognized from their darkest nightmares. The sonic weapons had been tuned to frequencies that resonated in Korthani brain tissue, creating hallucinations and terror responses that drove even their bravest soldiers to madness. Combined with the visual effect of ships that seemed to be made of living shadow, the psychological impact was devastating. Admiral Zekton clutched his command chair as his bridge crew began to scream. On the main screen, he could see shapes moving in the darkness between his ships, shapes that his mind insisted were not really there, but that his eyes could not ignore. The sounds coming through his communication system were the sounds from his species' most ancient fears, the voices of monsters that lived in the spaces between the stars. "Sir," his communication officer managed to gasp between fits of terror, "we're receiving surrender requests from 12 ships. Their crews are abandoning their posts." Zekton had conquered 17 star systems without losing a single major engagement. His fleet had broken species that had fought for their independence for thousands of years. But now he was watching. His own soldiers, bred for war and trained from birth to feel no fear, begging for mercy from an enemy they could not understand. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Humans are barely civilized. They have no understanding of advanced warfare." Dr. Murphy's voice came over the communication channel, calm and almost friendly. "Admiral, you're making the same mistake your empire always makes. You assume that because we're different, we must be inferior." On his screen, Zekton could see a human woman sitting in what appeared to be a research laboratory. She looked completely normal, nothing like the monsters his mind was telling him were surrounding his fleet. "We've been studying your species for 50 years, Dr. Murphy continued. "We know your fears, your weaknesses, your tactical doctrines. We know that your empire is built on the belief that overwhelming force is the answer to every problem." Another of his ships exploded as the invisible human weapons found their mark. Zekton could see his crew members collapsing at their stations, driven into catatonic states by sounds that seemed to be coming from inside their own minds. "The problem with that belief, Admiral, is that it only works when your enemies fight. The way you expect them to, we don't." Emma Clark's voice joined the transmission from Ganymede. "Your ships are designed to fight other ships. Your weapons are built to destroy large targets. Your soldiers are trained to face enemies they can see and understand." The tactical display showed that more than half of Zekton's fleet was now either destroyed or disabled. The survivors were broadcasting surrender messages on all frequencies, their crews no longer able to function in the face of an enemy that attacked their minds as well as their ships. "We fight differently," Emma said. "We fight to win." "Admiral." Zekton looked around his bridge at the few crew members who were still conscious. His mighty Third Fleet, the pride of the Korthani military, had been destroyed by an enemy that should not have been able to threaten even one of his ships. With shaking hands, he activated his surrender beacon. The Korthani Frontier Command Post at Proxima Centauri had stood unconquered for 300 years. The massive space station was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets and protected by shields that had never been breached. It coordinated military operations across 12 star systems and served as the forward command center for the Empire's expansion into human space. General Chris Thompson studied the tactical display from the bridge of his flagship, the converted colony vessel Retribution. His fleet of 60 ships looked impressive by human standards, but they were facing a fortress that had been designed to withstand the combined assault of 1,000 conventional warships. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the station commander." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of High Commander Velenith the Destroyer. The Corthony's scarred features and missing arms spoke to centuries of successful campaigns against species that had dared to resist the Empire's expansion. "Human fools," Velenith's translated voice carried contempt that needed no interpretation. "You bring 60 ships against my fortress. I have defensive systems that could destroy 600 of your primitive vessels. Turn back now and I will grant you the mercy of a quick death." Thompson smiled and gestured to someone off-screen. "High Commander, I'd like you to meet Major Kate Williams. She's going to be visiting your station today." The camera shifted to show a young woman in a sleek black uniform. Kate's enhanced features and glowing blue eyes marked her as one of the new generation of revenants, but her smile was warm and almost friendly. "Hello, High Commander," Kate said cheerfully. "I'm looking forward to seeing your station from the..." Inside, Velenith made a sound that the translator converted to laughter. "Child, my station is protected by energy shields, automated defense systems, and 10,000 of the Empire's finest warriors. How do you propose to get inside?" Kate's smile grew wider. "Very carefully. The first wave of human assault craft launched from the fleet, small ships that looked like they were heading for certain destruction against the station's massive defensive systems. The Corthony weapons opened fire immediately, filling space with deadly energy beams that should have vaporized the attacking force in seconds. Instead, the human ships began to phase in and out of normal space-time, following flight patterns that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. They moved between dimensions like ghosts, appearing just long enough to fire their weapons before vanishing again into spaces that the Corthony sensors could not track. Kate Williams piloted the lead assault craft with inhuman precision, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate through the station's defensive fire, while her modified brain calculated probability matrices that would have overwhelmed a normal human mind. Behind her, 24 other revenants followed her lead, their ships dancing between reality and something else entirely. "Impossible," High Commander Velenith muttered as he watched the human craft slip through his defenses like they were not. Our shields should stop anything that exists in normal space." His tactical officer, a veteran of 40 successful campaigns, stared at his instruments in confusion. "Sir, the human ships seem to be using some form of dimensional displacement technology. They're not exactly in our reality when our weapons fire at them." The assault craft reached the station's hull and began cutting through the outer armor, with weapons that seemed to exist partially in several dimensions at once. Kate's team moved through the breach like water flowing through cracks, their enhanced bodies adapting to the station's artificial gravity and toxic atmosphere in seconds. High Commander Velenith activated his internal communication system. "All security teams to breach points. Repel the human invaders." The Corthony defenders were the elite of the Empire's military, warriors who had been bred for combat and enhanced with the finest technology available. They had fought and defeated the best soldiers from dozens of conquered species, but they had never faced anything like the REVENANTS. Kate moved through the station's corridors like a living weapon, her enhanced strength allowing her to tear through bulkheads with her bare hands while her augmented senses tracked multiple enemies simultaneously. When the Corthony soldiers opened fire, she simply stepped sideways into a dimension where their energy beams could not reach her, then stepped back into normal space behind their positions. Her team followed her lead, moving through the station's defenses with a combination of superhuman ability and tactical knowledge that had been programmed directly into their enhanced minds. They fought in zero gravity, in crushing magnetic fields, and in atmospheric conditions that would kill normal humans in seconds. The Corthony defenders, bred for conquest and trained from birth to feel no fear, experienced terror for the first time as they faced enemies that seemed more like demons than soldiers. The humans used their own weapons against them, adapted to new threats with impossible speed. and continued fighting even when injured in ways that should have been instantly fatal, Admiral Tony Garcia, commanding the human fleet from the Retribution, received a priority transmission from Earth. Dr. Sandra Lee appeared on his screen, her face excited but also deeply worried. "Tony, you need to see this," Sandra said without preamble. "We've broken the encryption on the captured Corthony databases." The Galactic Council's ultimatum wasn't about territorial expansion or preservation laws. Garcia felt a chill run down his spine. What was it about? They were trying to prevent us from discovering the truth about galactic history. According to these records, the Corthony Empire wasn't the original aggressor species. They were refugees fleeing from something that drove them out of the galactic core over 1,000 years ago. The tactical display showed Kate's team fighting their way toward the station's command center, but Garcia was no longer paying attention to the battle. Refugees from what? Sandra's voice was barely above a whisper. "From us, Tony, from humanity. Or rather, from what humanity used to be before we somehow ended up isolated on Earth with no memory of our origins." Garcia stared at the screen in shock. "That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossil records going back millions of years. The Corthony records tell a different story. According to their historical archives, there was a species they called the Devourers that conquered most of the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. The genetic markers match human DNA perfectly." On the station, Kate Williams reached the command center where High Commander Velenith waited with his personal guard. The Corthony commander had drawn his ceremonial sword, a blade that had tasted the blood of champions from 17 different species. "Human demon," he snarled, "you will not take my station." Kate tilted her head, studying him with enhanced eyes that could see heat patterns and electrical impulses. "High Commander, I'm not here to take your station. I'm here to give you a choice." "What choice?" "You can surrender and live, or you can fight and discover what your species has been running from for the past 1,000 years, Velenith charged. With his sword raised, moving faster than any normal human could follow. But Kate was no longer entirely human. She caught the blade with her bare hand, her enhanced skin proving stronger than the metal, and looked into the Corthony's compound. Eyes. "Wrong choice," she said softly. Admiral Garcia watched the tactical display as the last Corthony resistance collapsed throughout the station. But his mind was still reeling from Sandra's revelation about humanity's true origins. "Sandra," he transmitted, "back to Earth. If we're really the descendants of this devourer species, why don't we remember? What happened to us?" Dr. Sandra Lee's image flickered on the screen. "I don't know, Tony, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." The Corthony records mentioned something called a Great Forgetting, an event that caused the Devourers to lose their memories and scatter across the galaxy. On the main screen, Kate Williams appeared from the command center of the captured station. Behind her, High Commander Velenith knelt in defeat, his sword broken at her feet. "Station secured, Admiral," Kate reported. "But sir, you need to see what we found in their databanks. The Corthony have been keeping records about humanity that go back a lot further than any of us suspected. The Corthony homeworld of Veltar Prime hung in space like a wounded giant, its surface scarred by 6 centuries of industrial warfare. Empress Veltara, the Eternal, waited in her orbital palace, surrounded by the last remnants of what had once been the mightiest fleet in the galaxy. 300 ships, all that remained of an empire that had ruled over 1,000 worlds. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the combined human fleet from the bridge of his flagship, the Annihilation. Around him floated every ship humanity could muster, vessels that had been converted from colony transports and mining platforms into instruments of war. They looked primitive compared to the sleek Corthony warships, but appearances had proven to be deceiving throughout this conflict. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the Empress is transmitting." The main screen showed a creature that barely resembled the other Corthony they had fought. Veltara was ancient beyond human comprehension, her carapace bearing the scars of countless battles and her forearms augmented with mechanical enhancements that spoke to centuries of warfare. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Admiral Morrison," she said, her translator giving her words a musical quality that seemed wrong coming from such a fearsome creature. "I have ruled this empire for 600 years. I have watched my fleets conquer species that your primitive minds could not even imagine. Yet here you are, at the heart of my domain, with your handful of converted cargo ships." Jake leaned back in his command chair, studying the alien Empress with calm eyes. "Your Majesty, we didn't come here to conquer your empire. We came here to end it." "End it?" Veltara's compound eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. "Child, you understand nothing about the forces you have unleashed. My species has survived for millennia by adapting to every threat, by becoming stronger with each challenge. You think your little rebellion will destroy us?" "No," Jake said simply. "I think the truth will." Dr. Alex Turner appeared on a secondary screen, transmitting from the captured Corthony archives on Proxima Station. Behind him, walls of alien data storage devices glowed with information that had been hidden for over 1,000 years. "Your Majesty," Alex said with scientific enthusiasm that seemed out of place in a war zone, "we've decoded your historical records, all of them, including the ones your own people have been forbidden to access." Empress Veltara's posture shifted slightly, the first sign of uncertainty she had shown. "Those archives are encrypted with codes that would take your primitive computers millennia to break." "Normally, yes. But we had help," Alex gestured to someone off-screen. "We found something very interesting in your genetic research facilities. Biological samples that your scientists have been studying for centuries, trying to understand how to fight an enemy that vanished long ago." The screen split to show Captain Michelle Brooks, leading the assault on the Corthony homeworld surface. Defenses. Her team of revenants moved through the alien capital city with inhuman grace, their enhanced abilities allowing them to disable defensive systems that had protected the world for centuries. "The samples were human DNA," Michelle reported as she placed explosive charges on a shield generator. "But not from any humans you've met recently. These were from specimens your people collected over 1,000 years ago, before something called the Great Forgetting." Empress Veltara rose from her throne, her ancient form moving with surprising speed. "You will not speak of that time. Those records are forbidden for good reason." Jake Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Your Majesty, I think it's time the galaxy learned the truth about both our species." Dr. Turner activated the archive transmission system, broadcasting the Forbidden's Corthony historical records across every communication channel in known space. Billions of beings throughout the galaxy suddenly had access to information that had been hidden since the founding of the Corthony Empire. "Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy," Turner announced, "allow me to introduce you to the real history of the last 1,000 years." The transmissions showed star maps, genetic analyses, and historical records that painted a picture very different from the accepted galactic narrative. The Corthony Empire had not risen to power through superior technology or military genius. They had built their civilization on the ruins left behind by a species that had simply vanished overnight. "The species your histories call the Devourers were not monsters," Turner explained as the data flowed across subspace. "They were explorers, scientists, and philosophers who had achieved a level of technological advancement that made them appear godlike to other species." Empress Veltara activated her ship's weapon systems, but her target was not the human fleet. Instead, she turned her guns on the broadcast station, trying to stop the flow of information that threatened to destroy everything her empire had built on. "You don't understand," she screamed into her communicator. "They were not peaceful explorers. They were nightmares made flesh, beings who consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion. We did not conquer the galaxy, we saved it from them." "Captain." Brooks appeared on the transmission from the surface of Veltar Prime. Behind her, captured Corthony scientists worked frantically at alien computers under the supervision of human revenants. "Your Majesty is partially correct," Michelle said calmly. "The Devourers did consume star systems, but not in the way your propaganda suggests. They converted matter directly into energy, using it to power technologies that could reshape reality itself. The star map showed the pattern of Devourer expansion, a methodical progression from the galactic core outward that had encompassed thousands of systems before abruptly stopping. Then came the Exodus records showing how the Corthony and dozens of other species had fled to the galaxy's outer rim to escape what they believed was certain destruction. But something happened, Turner continued. The Devourers didn't continue their expansion. Instead, they began to withdraw, abandoning their conquered systems and retreating to isolated pockets throughout the galaxy. Then, approximately 1,000 years ago, they simply forgot who they were. Jake Morrison watched Empress Valtara's face as the truth sank in. Her ancient features twisted with an emotion that the translator could not identify, something between rage and terror and desperate denial. The Great Forgetting was not a weapon used against the Devourers, Jake said quietly. It was something they did to themselves. They chose to give up their memories, their technology, their entire civilization, rather than continue down a path that they recognized was leading to the destruction of all life in the galaxy. The final piece of evidence appeared on screens. Throughout known space, genetic analysis comparing modern human DNA with the biological samples the Corthony had preserved from the Devourer era. The match was perfect down to the smallest detail. Humanity did not evolve on Earth, Turner announced. We were placed there, along with false fossil records and manufactured history as part of the Great Forgetting. We chose to become a young, primitive species rather than remain the galaxy's apex predators. Empress Valtara's final transmission was barely a whisper. You fools, you don't understand what you've awakened. The Devourers chose to forget for good reason. The power they wielded was too dangerous for any species to control safely. Michelle Brooks stood in the ruins of the Corthony capital, surrounded by the surrendering remnants of the Empire's military. Your Majesty, the choice was never ours to make. Your Empire's aggression forced us to remember what we chose to forget. President Helen Foster appeared on the transmission from Earth, her face grave but determined. Citizens of the galaxy, the Corthony Empire demanded our extinction because they recognized what we were becoming. They were right to be afraid. The human fleet moved into orbit around Veltar Prime as automated mining ships began converting Corthony worlds into raw materials for an expanding war machine. The process was eerily familiar to the historical records, matter being transformed into energy with casual efficiency that spoke to technologies beyond current understanding. The Corthony wanted a battle, President Foster concluded. Instead, we have given them annihilation, but not the kind they expected. We have annihilated their lies, their false history, and their empire built on the fear of a truth they could not face. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity's true journey was just beginning. They had awakened memories that had been buried for good reason, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Devourers have returned, he said quietly to himself. God help us all.